The new Wilson Clash is back and better than ever. So, if you don't know, one of the biggest things that happened with the Wilson Clash line is that when it first came out, it was a really big hit. A lot of people liked it. It was something that really hadn't been played with before or just seen before because of how just flexible the racket was. It wasn't very hard on the arm at all, but it still had good playability, especially for beginners getting into the sport, someone who's wanting to help get rid of or just prevent tennis elbow as well as the intermediate level players, they really ended up liking the Wilson Clash V1. And then, as it came out a few years later, Wilson decided to actually make the Wilson Clash V2. Now, the thing about the V2 is that if everyone who played with V1 then tried the V2, it ended up being that a majority of people absolutely despised or just completely hated that racket. Not all of them, but majority of people did. So Wilson listened to all of us. They actually took heed of what the consumer was saying. And so version 3 has gone back more towards version 1, how it played, with just a few minor tweaks to make it a little bit better. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Brody Taylor. I've been working in a tennis retail store for the past 7+ years, so I've seen all the iterations of the Clash come through, as well as I have just received my Master Racket certification, which is essentially meaning I took a test here in the United States that says I understand string technology, racket technology, and how it's going to work for your game. So, with that being said, let's dive into the Clash 100 Pro V3 and see what's going on. So, first thing first is that you have the Clash 100 Pro. This is going to be a 100 square inch head size racket. Now, the other Clash lines previously, they have had a 98 head size version and they've also had a 108 version, but the 100 has always been their main focus. Now, the 98 I do not believe is coming back for the version 3 line, so as of right now, the 100 Pro will be the most similar to that. But with the 100 square inch head size, it is going to be a little bit bigger, so it's going to help generate a lot more spin and a lot more power from most rackets, especially comparing them to a 98. So if you're just starting out into tennis or you just want a little bit more help from the racket, that's where the Wilson Clash can come in, especially with that 100 head size. So then, moving on with the Pro version, here's where the differences start to really take notice. And number one is going to be the string pattern. So most of the Clash rackets, they're the standard 16 by 19, but not the Pro. Because it's a Pro, it's a little bit special, a little bit different. You have a 16 by 20 string pattern. Now, if you don't know what that means, it essentially means that there are 16 strings going down and there are 20 strings going across. So that one little extra string right down there, that is going to help increase the amount of control you get just by a little bit because it is going to make the strings move a little bit less, not causing as much spin, not causing as much power, but that's where you're helping to get a little bit more of the control because the strings are able to deflect the ball a little bit easier when you do actually get to play with the racket. So that's where the 16 by 20 string pattern comes in. I would say if you're just starting out, this may not be the one to try out right away. I would maybe try the regular Clash 100 or maybe even the Clash 100 Lite if that is available to you to try out. Just because the 16 by 20, as well as what we'll get to next with the unstrung weight, this is going to be a little bit heavy for beginners or people who have never played with this type of racket before. So the unstrung weight, you're looking at about 10.8 ounces unstrung or about 305 grams. I'll just use G for grams. 305 grams unstrung. And then once you actually put the string inside of it, you add about, for the ounce conversion, you add about 0.6 ounces. So you're at about 11.4 ounces with the string inside of it. And then for the grams, you're usually around 320 to 323 grams. Yes, that might look like a 6, but it is a G for grams. So with this racket, there's a reason it's called the Pro version. It's because it is the heaviest version of all the Clash V3s that are out currently or that will be coming out here soon, which we'll get down to a little bit later. So with that, if you've never tried a racket that is this heavy, definitely be sure to demo this racket right now because they are only available for demo since they have not officially released. They will come out sometime here in 2025. Again, I'll give you the exact date right there in a little bit. But if you've never played with that weight before, the extra weight does help to make the racket a little bit more stable, whereas if you get a lighter weight racket, you are able to swing the actual racket faster. But if you're playing someone that has a lot more power than you and you're just trying to deflect their ball, it's a lot harder to do with a racket that has less weight to it. So the Clash 100 Pro just added a little bit more weight in order to make it a little bit more solid and just be a little bit more competitive as you start advancing and using this racket in higher level play. Now, with the stiffness, this is where the Clash racket line really starts to shine through. Now, I'll just give a range for this one because I haven't got to measure this one specifically. However, from what I've seen, there's been a whole slew of ranges, but I've seen one go as low as 51. I've seen some, I think it's usually around 55, maybe even 57. So, one of those two. Now, the reason that this is so significant is because this is why the Clash is so easy on the arm. The way that the Clash works is that what Wilson was doing is they really wanted to make one of the most flexible rackets that they could while still being a more, I'll say, accessible way to just have a power racket. Most power rackets are typically very stiff, very hard on the arm, like the Babolat Pure Drive or sometimes even the Wilson Ultra. But the Clash, because it is so unstiff and so flexible, it's a lot easier on the arm, but it still helps to generate a lot of power. So it's a weird feeling when you first play with it, but as you get used to it, that's where you can really start to feel the difference. And you can see why Wilson really went back to version 1 of the Clash rather than sticking with version 2. Version 2, when they were using it, a lot of people, just from my experience working with them, tend to felt that the second version was a little bit too stiff. It wasn't really what the Clash they knew and loved was for. Anyone who had tried just version 2, they didn't know about version 1, they're like, okay, this is pretty cool. It's still not as hard on my arm, but going from version 1 to version 2, not necessarily the easiest transition because of the increased little bit of stiffness, as well as just the feel was off. When you're playing with the new V3, because it went more towards how the original version of the Clash was created, you get a little bit more of a connected feeling to the ball, even though it is very flexible, as well as you do tend to notice that wherever you are hitting onto the ball, you can really feel the racket bend and you don't have any or majority of any of the vibration or shock from the actual ball hitting the racket getting back into your wrist or your arm. It's something to be mindful of, especially if you're trying to prevent tennis elbow and you're just wanting a racket that's going to be overall good for your health when you start playing. Now, as I said, I got to it. We're here. This racket will be available for purchase January 15th of 25. So, with that, it is not that far away, but you can demo these rackets out right now. I would at least recommend trying it if you are wanting a racket that is going to be pretty easy on the arm, not very hurtful, not very harmful, and just be such a nice tribute to version 1 while still just being a little bit better. When I was playing with this, the biggest thing I noticed, especially with the string that's in here, this is Luxilon ALU Power. And sometimes some people feel that the Luxilon strings, especially as they do go dead a little bit quickly, I tend to find that ALU Power specifically, as you continue to play with it, it feels great for like the first, I don't know how many hours, just because it depends on your play style. But for me, I'll say like 8 to 10 hours, it feels great playing with it. But then after that, it just kind of like dies really quickly. However, with the actual Wilson Clash 100 Pro, you really didn't feel the difference in how dead the string was because of how much the racket is taking away the vibration before it gets to you. So you could potentially use it a little bit longer. I'm not saying to do that. I am saying that if it happens to where you can't get it restrung, you have a little bit better of a chance of not getting hurt from having a dead poly in your racket. But if it does happen, the Clash 100 Pro V3 is going to be a little bit helpful in making sure that you don't get tennis elbow, because it is going to help get rid of a lot of that negative or just bad shock and vibration before it gets back to you. So One other thing I did notice, and this was just my own thing, because of how flexible this racket is, especially when I was hitting my backhand or I was just hitting a ball that was harder coming back at me than I'm used to, when I hit the racket, and say I hit the ball right here on the racket, I'd hit it, and then as I said earlier, you could feel where the racket bent, and then as it came back into place, as I was moving my shot forward, it just felt a little bit unstable because of how much it had flexed. But that's why overall I would say the Clash 100 Pro, or just even the Clash line, you're typically looking at more of that intermediate level of play. If you're going up to a higher level of player, you're playing major tournaments, or you're playing highly competitive college tennis, or even higher level tournaments, you probably aren't going to be using the Clash 100 Pro or just the Clash line. You'll probably go for something that's a little bit more stable, and just able to block back the ball a little bit easier. However, if you're coming up from your beginner racket and you're wanting something that's a little bit more arm friendly as well as stable because of the extra weight, but you're not playing up to an extremely high level yet, you're going to get there, you're just not there yet, then that's where I think the Clash 100 Pro would do very well for you. So, with that being said, that's all I got for the Clash 100 Pro V3. If you liked the video, leave a like on it. Comment down below any questions you have about the Clash 100 Pro V3, as well as if you've gotten to demo this before. I'd love to know what your thoughts are about it, because it is not released yet. And subscribe to the channel so we can grow this channel, get the information out there from the people that have it to the people that need it. And that way we can all enjoy the game of tennis we love so much more without having to worry about injury from our gear. So, with that being said, as always, take care.